Welcome one and all to another edition of Unfettered Speech. I'm Luis Diaz Perez, along with Patrick Sullivan. Um, and we are delighted to have a very special guest on with us today to talk about geopolitics, which is heating. It seems like every week, Patrick, there's more developments, the situation becomes more complex. And there's really no one better around the world in English to talk about these matters than Alex Christoforou of the Duran. Alex, an international man of mystery, equally comfortable on the streets of Queens, Moscow, Nicosia, Athens, you name it. And here you are today with us, and we're really glad to have you on. Um,
Thank
so,
you.
without
Thank you.
further ado,
Pleasure and honor. Pleasure and honor to be with you. Thank you so
great.
much for having me
Thanks,
on.
Alex. So,
Well,
without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to Patrick to get our conversation rolling.
well, Alex, it's first of all, just we were talking a little bit offline, but it's just great to have you, and both for Louis and I, and for literally millions of people around the world. You've helped us keep our sanity over the past 4 or 5 years when things seem to be teetering towards total disaster, and what you hear on mainstream media is, you know. You've got to punch bullies in the nose. That's what you do. And when we're talking about thermonuclear war, just the level of dialogue in the corporate media is beyond. It's shockingly stupid. And so to have you and Alexander Mercouris every day is just, again, for many people just a relief that there's somebody who's saying things that need to be said and doing real analysis of what's happening. So first of all, just wanted to say all the gratitude we have for you. But your expertise is obviously current events, and it seems like even in the last year, things accelerate every day. It's like a reality show, new things happening, new plot lines, and so on. We could start anywhere, but I think one of the things that Louis and I were sort of marveling over is the gross incompetence of European politicians. That they really have not risen to the moment that they're in. They just seem to be dumb and do things that are against their interest, that are against the interests of their people. And we could start anywhere, but one of the things we were talking about is the Nexperia issue, where the Dutch government seized an automotive chip manufacturer, which had the knock-on effect of closing down the European auto industry. Um, how do you think these politicians in power operate, and what do you think motivates them?
Gosh, I agree with you. I don't understand the thinking of the European politicians, if they even are thinking, to be quite honest. I can't remember a time in my life where we've had so many incompetent uh, European leaders. I've seen bad European leaders. I've seen sinister, devious leaders in the EU or in Europe, but at least they had some brains to them. These leaders are not only sinister, but they're also incompetent, and they seem to be working against their own people. They also seem disinterested, to be quite honest, in their people, in their populations. You look at Macron, and the sense that I get with Macron is someone who really isn't interested in France. He sees himself as something bigger than France. He's not interested in governing the French people. He sees himself as more of a European style emperor. I call him Little Napoleon. Actually, I think a lot of people call him Little Napoleon because he has that sense to him where he sees himself as this emperor of Europe, this man above France. And the Nexperia incident really highlights the incompetence of the EU leadership. I was stunned when I read the article that the production facilities in China they were going to put the export bans to the Netherlands, because I couldn't believe that in seizing this chip manufacturer, no one in the Netherlands, no one in Europe, in the EU thought, hey, these guys, they have a production facility in China. China might retaliate. Just maybe China might retaliate. It didn't cross their mind at all, but it didn't. It didn't. And maybe that speaks to their hubris, to their arrogance.
Well, yes, there's definitely a lot of arrogance there. I mean, you call Macron a little Napoleon. Napoleon obviously changed the world. He was an extremely intelligent man. Macron is not. He's just not, and he doesn't have the power of Napoleon. He doesn't have the troops of Napoleon. He doesn't have the strategic sense of Napoleon. He doesn't have anything Napoleon has. So, you know, again, not being able to think through when you see this, it makes me wonder. We complain about the U.S. how the U.S. government is captured by lobbyists and corporate interests. But you'd think that the corporate interests in Europe, if they had a voice, that someone at Volkswagen or Daimler Benz or somewhere would say, "Hold on, guys, before you do this, we make cars here. You may not know this, but we make cars here that need this product." Like, maybe they don't talk to anybody. It's bizarre.
Yeah, I think they are in their own type of bubble in Brussels, no doubt about it. I don't think they have much contact with the everyday world, to be quite honest. I don't think they have much contact with the outside, let's say, alternative media as well. I think they're in their own bubble from an information space perspective as well. I mean, I look at the EU leaders, and to me, they remind me of the Soviet Union type of apparatchiks. They're more administrators than anything else. That's the way I look at them, and they seem to just be getting orders or just executing orders, maybe from Brussels, maybe from the Commission, maybe above that, maybe from an oligarch, a European oligarch class. And they just seem to be executing these orders, and they don't really care or know the effects that these decisions have. The sanctioning of Russia, whatever your position is on the Russia-Ukraine war, it wasn't a good idea to sanction Russia, at least not in the way that they did it. I mean, maybe they could have phased in the sanctions. Maybe they could have. They had many different options that they could have considered before just going with this shock and awe type of sanctions policy, which we have seen decimate Germany, which is the engine of Europe. I mean, what is the EU? What is Europe without a strong, industrially strong, financially strong Germany? And now Germany is completely deindustrialized, or it's deindustrializing.
Right. Well, when it comes to the forces pulling on the European political class, how do you read Trump's hand in the Nexperia debacle?
There were court cases. There were documents from the court case that were published, which said that the Netherlands was under pressure from the United States. We don't know from which part of the United States. I look at the U.S. government as many different governments. To be quite honest, I think it's such a
Right.
big, sprawling infrastructure and architecture that I think you have a lot of different forces. I think there are forces for good, but I think there are also forces of hegemony and forces that would like to 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 keep or maybe a better word to say is to subjugate the EU to the United States without realizing that actually harms the U.S. as well. I think there are forces which believe, if we completely hollow out the EU and make them 100% dependent on us, then that puts us in a strong position. But I think these forces are not understanding that the EU is going to drag the United States down. It's not going to lift the United States up because there's really nothing in Europe to lift the United States up. I mean, Europe, when you think about it, when you take a step back, it really doesn't make much. It really doesn't have any cutting edge technology. It doesn't have AI. It doesn't have any type of social media. It doesn't really manufacture anything or have the resources of say, a Russia, or the resources that you might find in the Middle East, or rare earths that you might find in China, or anything like that. So, I think there's a thinking in the United States from one part of the U.S. government, which believes that having Europe be completely reliant on the U.S. is a good thing. I think that's a big mistake. I really think it's going to drag the United States down. It's not going to lift the United States up.
Yeah, I think you're right to point to like the deep factionalism in the American government and the American political scene, but particularly in the case of the government. And you're right. I mean, when the government speaks, it's maybe one faction that's ascendant in one particular policy area or another. And those are obviously forces pulling on the president or the executive, let's call it
Yeah.
at this point, that confounds things substantially or confounds understanding, substantially. Um, and you're right. I think, Europe doesn't really have a big natural resource base to draw on, right? And I wanted to also, your comments also, I think, lend themselves to remarking on Putin's recent remarks about, well, what are the effects of the most recent round of
Yeah.
sanctions going to be? He says, well, you're probably just going to see it reflected in higher gas prices at the oil pump, at the pump in the United States, right? Which I think was the point you were making, that
Yeah.
this is only going to reverberate or redound against the United States. But in all, both in the U.S. and Europe, it seems like policymakers really are not considering at all the effect on the general population of their decisions and their choices. And we're seeing it in a diminished quality of life across the West.
Yeah, yeah, I see it in Europe. The diminished quality of life. I mean, things are just more expensive, and salaries are not going up. Have not gone up. People are struggling in Europe. I mean, the average salary in Greece, for example, the monthly average salary in Greece is around 800 euros, 850 euros. That's it. That's an average, pretty good salary. 1,000 euros a month is a good salary in Greece.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, they were suppressed in the last financial crisis and never made it back. But
Right
let's talk
back.
about the information sphere that makes all that happen. So, you're seeing more and more censorship in places like the UK, France, other places as well. Stolen elections in Romania and elsewhere. Popularity of these governments in the high teens to low 20s. So they know something's up, right? So what are they doing? They're trying to censor their way out of it and keep people from having from finding any connection, right? That if you don't agree with this war, you don't agree with these sanctions, you don't agree with whatever, there's no one to talk to. How is it? Do you see that in Greece? Do you see it in other countries that like the regular people? Do they see through this, or are they still watching those corporate sources where everything's being suppressed?
Yeah, I would say in Greece, in Cyprus, I would say much of Southern Europe, they see through it. I think Southern Europe is a lot more cynical than,
Hmm.
say, the north of Europe. I think the north of Europe is much more trusting in their government, where in the south of Europe, for example, in Greece, we've got very little trust of our government, and that translates to very little trust in our media. They follow the mainstream media. They watch the mainstream media news shows, but they're just not very trusting of the mainstream media, nor are they trusting of what the government is telling them. I mean, that's the way it's always been, and that's the way it is now. And I also think in a country like Greece, or in a country like Cyprus, I would even say Italy as well. These countries in Southern Europe have generally done a good job in balancing the West, the United States, with China, or with Russia, with the East. We've always been proud of the fact that we've been able to have good relations with West and East. Now the demands of the European Union is pretty much it's 100% West, 100% Europe. There is no other countries that you can, as Greece or as Cyprus, that you can engage diplomacy with. You're 100% reliant on the center, which is Brussels, which is the way that Brussels wants it. I mean, when you have this type of government on top of a government, this union, this European Union, which is just a bunch of unelected technocrats. I mean, you're either going to have a strong periphery, or everything's going to be absorbed into the core, into the center. And that's what we've seen happen over the years and decades. The core, the center, has decided it's going to hollow out the periphery, and it's going to absorb power into Brussels HQ.
All right, well, let's layer the immigration question onto this discussion. Like you characterize Southern Europeans as being more cynical, perhaps being a little more clear-eyed about things. How much of that is because of their sort of more the sharper exposure to immigrants from the global South, and in general, how is that playing into people's sense of economic precarity, and secondly, their sense of culture of being, masters of their own home. How is that playing into the politics of Europe?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think a lot of the southern countries, they're at first when Merkel opened the floodgates in 2015, what we saw from the migrants that were coming into Europe is we saw them passing through southern Europe, but their ultimate goal was to get to the rich and prosperous north. So that's what we saw in the beginning of the migrant crisis under Merkel. The interesting thing is that over the past couple of years, a lot of the migrants that are coming into Europe, they're still looking at the north as at the prosperous, rich north. But what the European Union has done is that they have made it so that the migrants, when they enter the European Union, they pretty much stay put in the countries that they enter through. And so, Greece or Italy or Cyprus has had to adjust to a higher level of migration. And you also have the migrants are also aware now that, Europe, Germany, and the north of Europe, they're not as prosperous as they were, say, 5 years ago. The opportunities that we once had from 2015, say, to 2020 are not there anymore. So maybe we'll just stay here in Greece. The weather's good.
Right.
We get stuff paid for by the EU and by the government, so we'll just stick around here.
And how do people feel about that? I mean, is there a solution at the ballot box if they don't like it, or is it still the information environment that says if you question it, you're, a Nazi, or you're
Yeah,
white, whatever? So
yeah.
is there a way for people to rationally oppose it, or is it not really?
Not really, not really. There are parties on the fringe on both the right and the left, which have interesting platforms against, say, the globalist agenda, say against the EU integration agenda. They can be seen as patriotic parties. Maybe they can be seen as nationalistic parties. I mean, it depends. You do have smaller parties on the left and on the right, but the core, the center, left, right, and middle, still dominates.
Right. And how is the general population reading the suppression of some of these political parties that are not part of that center core that you just described? How is that playing?
They, they grow to a certain level,
Hmm.
but they can never break in. At least for Greece, for example, they can never break into parliament. They get to a certain level, but they just don't have enough money, support, or media backing to make a big impact. I mean, you have some breakthroughs. For example, the AfD in Germany is a party that obviously has broken through, and now I believe it's the number one party in Germany. In France, you can make an argument for Le Pen, but she's been around. Her family has been around for many years, so she's very much an established political figure. In southern Europe, you could say Maloney, but Maloney, she turned out to be pretty much center globalist.
Yeah.
That's the other issue. You do get politicians in the South and Southern Europe who present themselves as an outside anti-establishment figure, but the minute they get into power, they pretty much fold to Brussels' demands. In Southern Europe, I don't think we have the dynamic that you have, say, in Germany with AfD. You could make an argument, the UK with Reform and Farage, or Le Pen in France. At least in Greece and in Cyprus, we definitely do not have that.
Hmm. And how about just quickly on the AfD? Suddenly, 7 candidates die at once. Is this getting a lot of scrutiny in the media, or from political observers?
I mean,
Or
it
is,
does.
or is this just taken to be, the
Well,
course of nature?
it does, and a lot of people are questioning what exactly happened. But I think the bigger picture with AfD, the bigger story with AfD is that the stronger it gets, the more panicked the German political establishment is going to become. But the problem that they're having is that the stronger AfD gets, the more difficult it's going to be for them to cancel the AfD. They may have had an opportunity to cancel the AfD when it was polling at, say, around, say under 20%, and they were actually discussing some sort of mechanism to ban the AfD, but they didn't manage to achieve that. Now the AfD is, I believe, it's much too strong and much too big for them to cancel it. But that panic is going to force them to try and cancel it. So they're kind of stuck in this position where, yes, their only remedy against the AfD is to try and cancel it, but now it's too big to cancel it.
So
So,
maybe there are pressures ultimately that play out. And I want to segue a little bit to the pressure. You think the euro is sustainable?
Oh boy, yes and no. Yes and no, in that, the one thing that Europe is good at, that the EU is good at, the one thing, and only one thing that they're good at, is keeping the EU going. I mean, that's it. But if there's one thing they're very good at, is keeping the show on the road. And so I think the EU and the euro, those will be the last pillars of this globalist Europe to fall, to collapse. But they're gonna take it all the way to the end, and they'll keep the euro going, and the EU will find a way to continue to exist. And that's how they're going to approach the next. I think the next 5 to 10 years. They will do whatever they have to do to make sure that the Euro EU continue to exist in one form or another. The euro for me is a prison. When a country gives up its currency, it gives up its sovereignty. We are seeing countries now starting to resist adopting the euro. Bulgaria is going to go into the euro in 2026, even though a majority of their population do not want it. They do not want it. A large majority of the Bulgarian population is against adopting the euro because they understand what it means. Croatia adopted the euro just last year, and everything's gone up by 30, 40%. And they're very unhappy. Hungary is staying away from the euro. Poland is staying away from the euro, and Poland has a very globalist-oriented government. So, I mean, there are countries that are now saying, you know what, maybe it's not such a good idea to go into the euro. I mean, you lose your sovereignty, you lose your country's existence when you give up the euro. I've seen it. I've seen it in Greece. I've seen it in Cyprus when we had our debt problems, when we had our austerity and our debt issues. What did the EU do to crack down on the Cypriot or Greek people? They cut off our ATMs. They cut off our cash because they controlled the currency.
Well, the euro creates structural deficits, and you saw it in Greece very well. And when you don't have a currency that you can depreciate to deal with those structural deficits, it has to come from two other ways. Either your creditor writes some off, or you extend and pretend, which they did in Greece, which means you can't grow into the future because you're stuck paying off debts from 2007 forever. Ireland, same thing. So, it's a structural trap. And once you're in it, you're right about the sovereignty, but it's not clear you can really get out of it and that it's sustainable over the long term, especially now when they're talking about raising defense budgets as high as they are without cutting something, right? So how do they cut pensions to quote unquote go to war? How do they do that? I don't know how it's politically possible.
Yeah, austerity for all, huh?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, France tried to do it. Isn't the reason that Macron's government continues to collapse is because his number one issue, at least domestic in France, was to raise the pension age,
Right.
right? And he can't get that through. Obviously, he can't get that through. So he's having troubles with that. Now he's walking it back. Now he's saying, you know what, we'll put a pause in our pension reform. And I mean, they have to do it. Macron and his government, his prime ministers that he's had, the 5 prime ministers that he's had in the last 5 years or 3 years, are saying we have to do something about this because we can't continue. But they can't get the support from the left or the right on this, and
Yeah,
so
well,
the government keeps on collapsing.
doesn't this also help to explain, now we made it 25 minutes, we haven't brought up the Ukraine war, but, doesn't this help explain sort of the commitment to we're going to fight to the last Ukrainian? Because if Project Ukraine, once it crumbles for everyone to see, doesn't the rest of the sort of pan-European unity also start to unravel? And these forces will start to pull countries out of that orbit, and who could predict where that leads?
Yeah, I agree with you. You're spot on. The EU has invested everything in Project Ukraine, and we already see parts of the EU breaking off from this policy. You see it with Orban, you see it with
Exactly.
Fico. Perhaps you're going to see it with Babic in the Czech Republic. That remains to be seen. What if Le Pen wins in France in 2027? If the war is still going on, what's going to be Le Pen's stance when it comes to Project Ukraine? So I mean, the AfD has also said that they're not for Project Ukraine, continuing Project Ukraine. The problem with the European Union is that they're giving all of this money to Project Ukraine, but they don't have money for their own citizens, and the people are seeing that. When the war first started, everyone was thinking, okay, the Russian economy is going to collapse in 3 months or in 6 months. The war will be over, and then we can go about their lives. So we'll make, as citizens of Europe, we'll make our sacrifices as needed, right? And that didn't happen. The shock and awe sanctions against Russia failed. And I know that was the promise that Biden gave the European leaders. His promise to the European leaders was in 3 to 6 months, we will collapse the Russian economy. So don't worry about it. And Ursula von der Leyen, she was making trips to DC in October of 2021 and November of 2021, and they were planning out the sanctions strategy in order to collapse the Russian economy. But they didn't have an understanding of the Russian economy. They didn't know how the Russian economy worked. And they thought, if we just do this sanctions shock and awe, the Russian economy will collapse. We'll get into Russia. We'll get all of their resources. We'll plunder their resources. We'll start getting oil and gas at incredibly cheap prices, and everything will be good. It didn't work out like that, though.
Oh yeah, they thought their lumber mills would be busy with, the trees of Siberia, for free, and
Yeah.
it's
Well,
not
there is the
working out. But
corruption.
still you have Kaya Kallas out there talking about, no, we're going to divide Russia up into 5 separate regions. I mean,
Right.
from Estonia, it's like
Yes. Oh,
it's
and
just
wasn't she the one who didn't understand? She said publicly she didn't. She thought it was news to her that that the Soviet Union had a role in defeating the Nazis in World War II.
that was another
So
whopper.
those
Yeah.
are the people who are making those decisions. But I think there is
The top diplomat.
top diplomat. Yeah.
Right.
So, but there is the corruption theory of everything, and the one through line through all this is corruption, right? That if it worked out the way that Biden promised it would work out, there would be plenty of corruption opportunities in the shattered Russian Federation for all kinds of politicians to put their kids in charge of things and to loot things. However, if the war goes on, we can increase the defense budget, and there's plenty of corruption to be had in all those defense contracts. There's plenty of corruption to be had in feeding money to Ukraine where it disappears, and no, we don't know where it goes, but I think the politicians know where it goes. So that is one thing that hey, if they dismantle Russia, there's plenty of corruption. If they don't dismantle Russia, there's still plenty of corruption. If they do shock and awe sanctions, well, what are sanctions? Opportunities for corruption. What was prohibition? Opportunities for corruption. All these sanctions are opportunities to evade the sanctions. And you put your kid, your nephew, your wife, whoever in charge of some entity that can help someone evade the sanctions. It happens all the time. So the one thing you see in all of this is, there's plenty of graft opportunities all along the way in all of these EU policies.
Absolutely. I mean, Kaya Kallas' husband, I believe he was in a scandal last year. Before she became the top diplomat, her scandal was that her husband, with all the sanctions, he had a business going on with Russia,
Right.
right?
And
So there were all these sanctions going on, and everyone was blocked from doing business with Russia. But her husband had some sort of, I think it was like a supply, a shipping or supply chain business with Russia.
Yeah,
consulting,
Ruse,
Yeah.
where that's beautiful. But again, I guess that can go on a long time. I don't know. I mean, I think you can probably pivot when the Ukrainian war is lost to pivot to blame the Hungarians or blame the Duran or blame someone for saying things, and they amp up the censorship and just keep looting. I don't know. Maybe the collapse of Ukraine leads to the collapse of these politicians. I'm not sure.
It's
I mean,
possible. It's possible that that'll happen. I mean, what we've pointed out, at least with the Trump administration, what we've tried to make a point of, and unfortunately, it hasn't registered, is that that Project Ukraine will also bring down Trump's foreign policy, and it just doesn't. He just does not seem to be getting it. He had the opportunity to walk away from Project Ukraine the minute he got into office. But he didn't take that opportunity. He decided that he wanted to try and negotiate or solve the conflict in Ukraine. I'm not even sure what he was thinking or who was advising him. But January 21st, he could have come into office and he could have said, you know what, this was Biden's policy, this was Biden's project. God knows Biden's family was knee deep in Ukraine, right? I mean, everyone knows this. Mm-hmm. Biden's famous speech at the Atlantic Council, right? I told him, you have 6 hours to fire the prosecutor or you're not going to get the billion. I mean, it's all there. It's all out there.
Exactly.
So Trump could have it's all there. Trump could have just said, you know what? It's over for us. We're out. We're out of this game. We don't need it.
Even the speech last February where he said, we hold all the cards and you don't hold any cards.
Yeah.
You know what he's talking about. All he needs to do is shut off the weapon supply and it's game over. But
exactly. Alex, you make the point regularly. All he has to do is just walk away.
Yeah.
Every single day he has that chance just to walk away, and he always takes a step in the wrong direction. I want to touch on something Patrick brought up, though, about the corruption. I'm thinking about the hundreds of billions in Russian assets held in Euroclear. And it seems like they're very tempted, to dive in and have that finance some more of their rotten projects, including Project Ukraine. How close do you think they actually are to pocketing those billions and putting them to use against Russia?
Well, it was 300 billion, wasn't it? Like 3 years ago, it was 300 billion. Then it went down to 250. Then it went down to 220. Now it's 140 billion.
140, yeah, it's down to 140.
Yeah, I saw 180 is what I said.
Yeah, it's 140 now is what they're saying. Mm-hmm. So 140. Okay. The EU has said we don't have money. We don't have money to give to Ukraine. Ukraine has until 2026, and that's it. It's mm-hmm. broke. I mean, it's already broke. It lives on loans, IMF loans, U.S. money, whatever the EU gave it in the past. Okay, that's how it's surviving. But that runs out in 2026. So the only thing they have now is that 140 billion. They're going to take that money. There's no doubt about it. They were going to take it yesterday, actually. They're going to take it this week.
They were going to start by taking the interest, or have they already taken the interest?
They've already taken the interest many times over. So the interest generates 1.5 billion a year, but they've been taking the interest for about 2 years. And my suspicion is that it's not really the interest that they're taking. They're actually going into the principal now, because every loan that's being given to Ukraine, whether it's the UK, whether it's any European country, Germany, whatever, they always say this money is backed by the interest from the Russian frozen assets. Well, they've given a lot more than 1.5 billion, right? So, I mean, that's why I think you see the number of the actual amount of the frozen assets get down to 140 billion.
And to be clear, these assets are payables to Russia that were payable in February 2022 and were frozen. So
this is the cash, the central bank. Yeah, this is the So I think they were going to take it this week, and we got the news that Belgium put a stop to it last minute because the other countries in the EU did not want to share the risk. They wanted to put all the risk on Belgium, where Euroclear is located. And they didn't want to spread out the risk. So Belgium, basically their argument was, look, most likely Euroclear is going to get hit with a ton of lawsuits. Mm-hmm. Belgium's going to be toxic as far as investment goes. Most likely the EU is going to be toxic as far as investment goes. But if we're going to sign off on this, we want solidarity across all the member states. And it looks like a lot of member states balked. They said no. So they're pushing it back now to December. But when they take that money, that's how you know that Project Ukraine is completely over. That's how I see it. I mean,
well,
Yeah.
It's the most self-destructive thing. I mean, I remember an old movie when I was a kid. It was about guys stuck in space, and the astronaut up there was having oxygen deficit, and down on Earth they're saying, "Don't blow the hatch. Do not blow the hatch." And this guy's laughing. He thinks it's funny, and he eventually blows the hatch, and he gets shot up into space because he didn't have the mental capacity to understand the consequences of his actions anymore.
Yeah.
Well, that's like this because if they do this and take this money, who is going to trade with them? Who is going to leave payables sitting there ever again? And not
Yeah.
just the euro, also the dollar. How does the dollar become a reserve currency if it's at the whim of whatever administration wants to punish you for anything that comes up? You invaded a country, you don't support, gay rights, you don't whatever. All of a sudden, you don't get your payables. Why would you deal? Why would you leave any money lying around in that country?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
They
that
also
goes.
tried to get the
Rely on that
G7. On that point, they tried to get the G7 to also share in the risk of
in
the
the risk.
140 billion.
Oh, don't
Yeah,
worry,
they
we'll
tried,
be
and
indemnified by
the U.S.
Belgium.
told them no way. The U.S. said no way, but I
Yeah.
mean, this is
Well,
crazy.
the U.S. might cut Europe loose on this, right? Say like, "Hey, we never would have done this." I mean, in World War II, we did not. We continued paying our obligations to National Socialist Germany because that's what's done with payable. You don't politicize that because that's if you have fiat currency, it's based on the full faith and credit. Well, if your full faith and credit's if you don't have faith and you don't have credit, what do you got? You got a piece of paper.
Right. But I would just add one clarification to that. The United States has done it. If you go around, you see the disappearance, say, of Citgo gas stations, right? The United
Yes.
States has taken over all of the Venezuelan petroleum company, which is state-owned company, taken over all of their assets in the United States, including, their liquid assets in banks across the United States. So they've done it, small scale, and it seems like that practice will only expand, as they're in the desperation of these elites to hold on.
Well, I
Yeah.
think the difference there is that they created a liability. So they sued the Venezuelan government. They created a payable, and they said, "Hey, we're executing a judgment, and therefore we're going to take these U.S. assets in fulfillment of a court judgment."
Right.
But what judgment are you going to get against Russia? You don't take Russia
Yeah.
to court for invading Ukraine
Yeah, but
because
it's just a formalism with
yeah,
Venezuela. I mean, they
yeah.
just, you
And they've done it with Iran, but in Iran they froze the assets since 1977, and there's always been discussion about it's sitting there collecting interest, and I'm not sure they might have given it back in the first nuclear deal or some of it. But
Yeah,
anyway,
I
it was
think
sitting there. It
Obama
was
gave
never
some of it
seized.
back. Yeah, I think Obama gave some of it back.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
right.
Um,
Well, anyway, this whole thing is escalating, and eventually now it's reached Russia, and really untold, there's enormous fortune that they're going to sequester.
Russia's gonna go after their money. There's no doubt about it. They're
yeah.
gonna go to every court on the planet to go. The Russians are not gonna let this thing go. No
Yeah.
doubt about it. Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
sure.
if you were another, so it's that's also comical. And again, the competence of these people is just astonishing. So even if you wanted, here was your plan that you were going to have Belgium seize the Russian assets and distribute them to you, and if you ever got a court case against you, you'd be indemnified. France, Germany, these massive economies
Hmm.
are going to be indemnified by Belgium. Well, there's a good credit. There's a risk you want to take. It's like you're going to execute a judgment against Belgium for all of your liabilities for seizing 140 billion dollars in assets. You know, it doesn't even make sense. It's not practical.
Yeah. It goes back to the point where we were making, where this is the toxicity of the European Union, and this is why I always argue. Me and Alexander argue when it comes to the United States. You need to cut the EU loose. You need to cut it loose. Because I mean, we see the people that are running the show there. We see the ideas that they come up with. We see the stuff that they're doing, and it's these are the things that will bring the United States down, or will bring the U.S. dollar down. And the EU is trying to. I mean, they're desperate to keep the United States in. They're desperate to keep the U.S. in. And Trump's job was just one: just let the EU go, and it would actually help the EU as well. Without
Well,
having the United States in back of them, maybe they would start to think about their leadership a little bit more, right? Maybe
well,
make
back
better
back in the
decisions.
2007 era, remember the Freedom Fries era when the French wouldn't go along with the invasion of Iraq,
Right.
and they actually had German politicians who wouldn't toe the U.S. line, and Europe was sort of made to be the United States of Europe a counterweight to the power of the United States. What's happened since then?
I
How
think
is
that's a
it?
great point. I think it's good when you have these counterweights on both sides. I mean, they keep you in check and they keep you from making terrible decisions. But that's gone. That's completely gone now.
Right, it's gone, and there is no statesmanship anywhere to be found. It seems like in the West, and brings me to the erratic behavior of the current administration in Washington. You know, you see it in everything. You see it from like the, well, let's just start with the latest round of sanctions now. You know, we're ending trade negotiations with Canada, sanctioning India and Russia all in one fell swoop, right? And then finally, the whole Tomahawks uh, issue that Trump revived, that Putin, I think, has given a very, very strong statement on within the last, 24, 36 hours. How do you read this situation developing with respect to the Tomahawks?
Well, the tomahawks were a bad idea from the get go from Trump, Kellogg, Rubio, Lindsey Graham. Once again, I don't know where they're coming up with these ideas and why Trump is running with this stuff. Trump campaigned against the long range missile strikes into Russia, into the Russian Federation. I remember it. I remember him giving speeches saying Biden is crazy. I remember him giving a speech at Mar-a-Lago, about a 3-minute statement saying that Biden's going to get us into World War III, into a nuclear war, by allowing the ATACMS missiles to hit pre-2014 Russian Federation. I remember that speech.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching it and I was saying, yes, finally, yes, you're right. And Trump said, when I'm in office, I'm not going to do any of that stuff.
Mm.
And here he is, not only talking about ATACMS, which have a range of 300 kilometers and are non-nuclear, he's talking about Tomahawk missiles, which have a range of 2 to 3,000 kilometers and can be nuclear. And the problem with the Tomahawks is that Russia, NATO, this proxy war, they've done a good job of hiding NATO's involvement, the US, UK, France, NATO's involvement in this proxy war, okay? The US, yes, provides the satellite info. Yes, you have Starlink. You have NATO troops, mercenaries, but they've managed to hide it. Both sides, Russia and the West. I think for the obvious reason that they don't want this thing to escalate and get out of control. They don't want this thing to spill over either. With the Tomahawks, you can't hide the fact that it's going to be the United States military firing these things. You just can't hide that fact. So you're going to have U.S. troops. I mean, what was Trump thinking? We're going to have U.S. contractors or U.S. troops in Ukraine firing Tomahawk missiles into Russia?
Russia.
I mean, in my lifetime, I've never heard of any such insanity in my life. One nuclear power firing missiles into the country of another nuclear power. To me, this was just insane. Absolutely insane.
When we were growing up,
Russia's not going to respond.
Just the idea of a soldier firing an M16 across, the Berlin Wall would have been like, frightful beyond thoughts, And
We always understood there were proxy wars. I mean, I grew up and, okay, we understood. You have proxy wars. You have one side, the Soviets here, the U.S. here. Okay, so there's a proxy war and they fight it out, right? That was understood. Okay, this is reality. But I mean, this is at a whole different level of insane.
Yes. Right. Well, I think if there's any explanation for it, and I'm not trying to explain it, but if you read The Art of the Deal, one of Trump's instincts is always to have the best hand possible and to bluster your way through everything and to threaten, all kinds of retribution and then settle. But do it when you have a bad hand. Make yourself having the best hand you can by puffing it up and faking it. So I think it's possible that he just thought, well, Tomahawks, this will scare the Russians into coming to the table and, I'll have a better hand. Because the reality is the Russians have the great hand here. They're winning. And they have the manpower, they have the industrial base, they have the geographic positioning. They're going to win this thing. So what cards does Trump really have? Maybe. But you're right. It was absolutely insane to think that we're sitting here, a few hours potentially from a nuclear exchange when you're firing Tomahawk missiles, which you'd have to call them and say, hey, we're firing one, but it's not nuclear armed. You would
Right.
have to do that in order to preserve civilization.
And how does Russia respond to that? I mean, even if you call them up and you say we're firing long range missiles, they're not nuclear, but we're going to fire long range missiles 2,000 kilometers deep into Russia so we can hit
Oh,
some of your. I mean,
thanks. Yeah.
you
Oh,
you
that'll be
put
okay. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
you put Putin in a, and the problem that the Trump administration has with all of this, they continue to have with this, is that they put Putin in a terrible position as well, because Putin invested a lot of political capital into diplomacy with Trump. I mean, there was no diplomacy with Biden. They weren't even talking. Okay, everyone understood that. But with Trump, there was this possibility of normalization of ties between Russia and the United States. And whether people like it or not, whatever people's feelings are about Russia or about the United States, the two countries need to work together for the good of the world. There's a lot of topics outside of Ukraine, a lot of issues outside of Ukraine that need to be addressed by the United States and by Russia together. And Putin approached Trump with the understanding, and he sold to the people of Russia that this is the one president that at least will talk to us, that we can talk to, that I can call up, and that we can discuss things, whether it's Ukraine or whether it's START treaties, nuclear proliferation. At least we have someone on the other line that we can talk to, because Biden, there was no one there. There was no one willing to talk to Russia, and he got burned. He got burned because the Russian people said, okay, so you invested all of this time in diplomacy. You went to Alaska. You went to the United States. You've had 6 phone calls with the guy. And now he's coming along and saying he's going to fire long-range missiles into our country. Is this the result of the diplomacy? Is this the result of your political capital, President Putin? And he had people like Medvedev, who's taken a hardline position, calling him out on this. Right. When Medvedev posts these things on social media, these very hardline positions, he's not really speaking to the United States or to Trump. He's addressing these things towards Putin.
Yeah, within the Kremlin, I think that you're seeing the hardliners becoming ascendant. I think, what was Medvedev's recent line? He said the generals need to be given a voice, or we need to hear the voice of the generals. I think it was just as explicit as that. They're going to settle this on the battlefield.
Yeah. They're saying, "We told you so, President Putin. We told you. We told you so."
How much more can Putin dig into the whole, give diplomacy a chance line?
He's going to try. He'll always leave that door open. I believe he'll always leave that door open. But I think for now, he's going to have to take a step back. And I think Trump, the sad part about it, and I'm going hard on Trump, I'm criticizing him a lot. Mm-hmm. But, he placed those sanctions on Russia and on the Duran. Me and Alexander have always taken a position that the minute Trump caves to sanctions, to placing sanctions like what he did on Rosneft and Lukoil, it's over. He's he can't expect any type of normalization with Russia anytime soon. He's completely gone into the camp of the Europeans and Ukraine, and they're going to ask for more. Trump may think, maybe his calculation is, I'll put these sanctions, and that way I'll pacify the Lindsey Grahams or the Keith Kellogg's or the Zelenskys, right, the Macrons or the Stammers. No, that's not what's going to happen. They're already asking for more. They're already saying, okay, now that we got the sanctions, President Trump, now we want the Tomahawks, and they're not going to stop.
No, that's right. You guys have always been very clear in describing they never get off the escalation escalator, right?
Escalation ladder.
Trump's on it now. Trump's on it now.
He's
on
on
that
it.
escalation. Yeah. That's the sad part to all of this.
Yeah.
Wow,
well, so Alex, we have a few minutes left. So, we talked about how abysmal many things are, especially in your part of the world, but everywhere. How does this all resolve? Do we just go on this way with, censorship and poor economies and no political support for leaders who somehow cling to power and, develop opportunities for corruption for their family, and it just goes on like this, stripping industrial bases, stripping middle class people around the world? Or is there some resolution that you see?
Unfortunately, I think this goes on at least for Europe. I think Europe is now about to face decades of depression, humiliation. I think that's the position of Europe. I think Ukraine will be solved on the battlefield, and I don't know what what Ukraine is going to be, say in 6 months to a year or two. I don't even know if it'll exist. I don't know if it'll be a rump state of Ukraine. I think there's going to continue to be a shift towards BRICS. I think BRICS will continue to gain momentum. And I think my only hope is that the United States can find a way, or Trump can find a way to participate in what I see as the multipolar world order. I mean, I think it's better for Trump to realize, for the United States to realize that it benefits them to have a seat at the table as this shift is unfolding, so that they can also shape it, rather than siding with the Europeans and not being at that table. And I think this is the dilemma that the United States finds itself in. If they continue to stay hitched to NATO and the EU, I don't see anything good coming out of that. But if they can find a way back, so that they can sit with India, with Xi, with Putin, with Brazil, the U.S.'s own hemisphere, and find a way to say, okay, look, we are the superpower, but we want to sit and find a way to stabilize the world. I think that's the hope that I have.
Right.
Is it going to happen? I don't know. I really don't know if that's what's going to happen. Right now, I would say that Trump is being advised very, very poorly, and I just don't see him changing directions. I mean, Keith Kellogg is still there. He hasn't. You have good forces like, say, Witkoff and Vance, but you also have these forces like Kellogg, who still seems to have Trump's ear.
Right. Yeah, and in the meantime, you've got these other sort of feckless people. I mean, it's funny that no one's occupied both Secretary of State and National Security Advisor since Henry Kissinger, and you've got Marco Rubio, who, by the way, at the beginning of the administration said, recognized the word multipolar world or expression came out of his mouth.
Where did that guy go?
You know where I'm going with this, right? It's like, and now nothing. You never see a guy with like supposedly all of this power, at least formally speaking, completely out of the picture, except maybe he's an architect of this, horrific policy in, Venezuela and Colombia now. But otherwise, he's a cipher occupying this enormous, what you would think would be an enormous role in the administration. Just speaks to their fecklessness and, lack of direction.
Yeah, he has a lot of power, Rubio, now.
Mm-hmm.
An immense
Yeah,
amount
on
of power.
paper.
You're right.
On paper.
On paper, yeah. On paper.
But it is true. In order to do that, in order to do anything that you said, Alex, join the multipolar world and make the best of it. Because look, a lot of the people in a lot of these countries, if you're concerned about people and their welfare, you've been to Russia. I haven't lately, but you've been to Russia, and people are doing pretty well there. Same with China. Things are pretty nice there now. And so joining with the prosperous multipolar world takes some courage, right? And there's going to be bitterly disappointed people who can't steal anymore, and their kids can't steal anymore. They're going to be angry, right? And they're going to call you names, and they're going to say that you ruined everything. And so you've got to have the courage and the political momentum to overcome that. Maybe these people don't feel they have that momentum, and it's easier just to run a reality show.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think the word is courage. But, Trump has the backing of the American people, most of the American people. I mean, I think if he would take his case, this case that you just outlined, to the American people, I think the American people would say yes.
I agree.
Absolutely. Do it, President Trump.
Yes.
And I think they would be happy with it. But I get a sense with Trump that he understands that he has this America First movement, but I also get the sense that he's not confident in it as well. It's he has a weird thing going on. He understands that it's there, but he also doesn't feel like, this will have my back if I do get the courage.
Right. Well, I guess they turned on him during the Iran war, And it seems like he still wants the approval of the New York Times. He wants the approval of the Nobel Committee. Those people are corrupt. They're
Yes.
totally corrupt. Their prize means nothing. And if you understand that, then you don't care if you get the Nobel Prize or not. But I think Trump still wants that kind of old-fashioned approbation from those kinds of people who are exhausted and corrupted and are worthless. But to him, it still means something.
You're
Yeah,
exactly right.
that's the water he swims in. He's an establishmentarian. He can't get outside of that, you
Exactly.
know. And maybe there's a fear factor too. I mean, I don't know exactly what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, but maybe he's afraid of, like, you know,
Even in his
bad
first
people.
term, yeah, even in his first term, he had this weird desire, this weird want to be accepted by the
Right.
people that hated him most.
Right, right.
Right, the Boltons and all of these
Yeah,
guys.
it's true. And the people who hated him most didn't hate him necessarily for policies. They hated him for his personality.
Yeah,
They just didn't feel he was they're part of their milieu. It wasn't that he was doing something that was so radically different from any other Republican president by any means. You look at his policy accomplishments. George W. Bush could have done the exact same thing, and did.
Yeah,
you're
So,
exactly
exactly right.
so, well, Alex, look, we appreciate all the work that you and Alexander are doing. As we said in the beginning, having voices like yours out there keeps us all sane because, if you didn't have that and you just heard this massive disconnect between what you were seeing with your own two eyes and what the media were telling you, it would lead to dissonant cognitive dissonances all over the world. And the value that you guys create, I think, is just immense. And so, I know Louis and I are big fans, and we really appreciate everything that you
likewise.
do every day.
Thank you as well for all the work that you do, and hopefully it will be the independent, the alternative media that makes a difference. Maybe our space can make a difference going forward.
Well, I think your space definitely has, and you know, the growth. You're over 500,000 subscribers, as I get it. Last I looked, it's outstanding. It's a testament to the integrity of your work and the thoroughness of your work. And you know, we just wish you all the best, and we hope to have you on again.
My pleasure.
Those of you who've made it to the end of this, we encourage you to like and subscribe. It helps expand our voices and the voices of the people that we have on. So thank you.
And also for the Duran, where can people find the
Yeah,
Duran
by all
and
means.
more of you, Alex?
Yeah, we're on just about every platform, everywhere from YouTube to Rumble. We have a locals page as well. We have a locals community, and we just started up a Substack. We're on X, Telegram. We try to go on all of the platforms, big and small, because I think it's important to have your news reach as many people possible. There's YouTube, but I think there's a lot of other independent platforms as well. So we try to get onto everything.
It's great. It pays to be anti-fragile because you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Who's going to ban you next. So,
Absolutely.
again, thank you for everything, and hope to see you again. We'd love to have you back,
It
and,
would be my
and
pleasure.
Alexander as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Great pleasure. Thank you.